Hello and welcome to the addendum of the Tank Ammo Guide for War Thunder. This video is a follow-up where I'll go over the shells that weren't featured last time. Most of these are pretty obscure, only being found on a handful of vehicles, but today I'll be giving detailed explanations along with visual guides to help you understand them all. First up, we have the anti-tank guided missile overflight top attack. Now, I know what you're thinking, didn't I explain this last time? Well, you see, there's actually a second variant of the ATGM-OTA. This model has the shaped charge pointed downwards instead of forwards, and instead of climbing and then descending, it hovers slightly above where you aim. Once it gets close to its target, the explosive detonates, forcing the liner through the top of the vehicle. These missiles typically have low penetration values due to their unorthodox design, but don't be discouraged. Tank armor is usually weakest on the roof, so as long as there's no ERA, the missile should deal some decent damage. The second round we'll be discussing is the high explosive obstacle reduction shell found on some of the later Abrams variants. In essence, HEOR is like a semi-armor piercing heat round. Instead of detonating on impact, it first penetrates a couple centimeters of armor and then goes off. If it manages to go through before detonating, it'll deal damage similar to that of an APHE shell. If the armor is too thick though, it'll act like a regular heat shell. Like its name suggests, the round is used against fortifications and other such emplacements IRL, but in-game it's not particularly useful. In a similar fashion, we have the target practice shell. This one isn't even in the game anymore, it was only available on the T80U during the Tank Biathlon event back in 2020. It's pretty much just a solid shot armor piercing shell, but in the shape of APHE-DS. As you might expect, it's meant for target practice in real life so the tank crewman could train without using actual anti-tank rounds. While it might not have a shaped charge, it is still a 20kg piece of metal flying at 900 meters per second. Centurion 1 made a video demonstrating how it performs in game. If you want to check it out, I've left a link in the description. For this next shell, we're going back to World War II, specifically on the Maus and E100, with the armor-piercing high-explosive discarding Sabo round. This was a very obscure and experimental shell, and as the name suggests, was an APHE round with a Sabo that gets discarded after leaving the barrel. Its main purpose was to increase the shell's velocity, and while its real-life efficiency is disputed, it works quite well in-game with more than 300mm of penetration. Check out Kornovark's video if you're interested about the history of the shell, link in description. Next on the chopping block is AHEAD, also known as Shrapnel Time Fuse. It's currently only on the Puma IFVs, and how it works is pretty intricate. The design consists of an electronic fuse, a bunch of sub-projectiles, and the outer casing. When the vehicle locks onto a target, its information like velocity and distance is measured by the fire control system. Afterwards, the system calculates and programs the muzzle velocity and fuse of each individual round. When the shell gets within range of the target, the outer casing flies off and the sub-projectiles are released, essentially causing a shotgun effect which can be devastating for light targets like aircraft. At least that's how it works in real life. The fuse is not the most reliable thing in game, but it's still a pretty cool piece of munition nonetheless. Speaking of anti-air, we have the Starstreak. On the surface, this might just look like any other SAM, but upon closer inspection, you'll see that it's actually a kinetic type of ammo. It consists of a first stage rocket motor, a second stage rocket propellant, and 3 darts inside a tungsten alloy housing. The first stage motor launches the missile, and after it gets far enough, the second stage rocket propellant activates. When the propellant burns out, the darts get released, and they travel in a formation as far as they can until they eventually run out of velocity. These projectiles can deal some serious damage to both aircraft and light ground targets. Not only that, each dart also contains explosive filler, so if they manage to penetrate, there'll be some post-pen damage as well. Again though, that's only in theory. The Starstreak is notorious for being quite buggy in game, where it just passes straight through a target without doing anything. Like with the AHEAD shell though, it's a neat ammunition type. The next shell we'll be looking at is high explosive fin stabilized. As the name suggests, this is an HE round with fins. Like with APHE-DS and APHE-DS, the fins in the back provide fin stabilization, which prevents the shell from tumbling or veering off course. In pretty much all practical applications though, it performs the same as a high explosive shell. Check out the original ammo guide to learn more about spin and fin stabilization. In a similar fashion, we have the time and variable time fuse variants of the HE shell. Previously, these two shells detonated based off the rangefinder or proximity fuse. Since the Firebirds update though, you can now switch between impact and their respective fuse types. So if you have an HEVT shell for example, you can switch to its radio fuse for anti-air work, and then switch to its impact fuse if you face ground targets. Here's the keybind for those who are interested. Lastly, we have the Burr, probably one of the most obscure rounds, not just in game but also in real life. The Burr is an unguided rocket-propelled high-explosive shell, only found on the Object 775. Essentially, it's a smaller version of the rocket fired from a low-velocity smoothbore. I'm not sure if Burr is supposed to mean anything. I mean, the in-game letters are all capitalized, so it might be an acronym, but there were no other sources where this was the case. A quick Google Translate says that it means drill in Russian, but if anybody in the comments wants to correct me, please go ahead. Information about this projectile is very limited, as you might expect from a Soviet prototype from the 60s. And that about wraps it up. If you still think I missed something, let me know in the comments. Other than that, thanks for watching and happy April Fool. Wait, hold on. Looks like I actually did miss one. Besh is a